Thanks for coming, everyone. Today's session's on communicating effectively with others using a person-centered approach, and it'll follow on in terms of working with diverse people, because that's the unit at the moment within what you're studying with the Cert IV mental health. So today we'll discuss the person-centered approach, and then we'll go over some basic active listening skills, and then there'll be a group activity which I'll lead to. And yeah, let's begin. So the person-centered approach, does anyone know what it is? Any ideas? Anyone want to come up with something based on what it may suggest?
Based on the title?
Yeah, exactly.
Centered on the person. I don't know what else it would be centered on.
Yeah,
The
well,
approach.
I guess it's fairly self-explanatory, but yeah, there's quite a lot of theory behind it. As
Well, it says the person-centered approach. The approach to what? That's what I don't know.
I guess you have to let me explain.
Perfect.
Sweet. So it's a non-directive approach to being with another, and this approach believes in another's ability to make their own choices, regardless of one's own values, beliefs and ideas. And there's times when this approach can be adopted well within a duty of care. Have you guys got any examples within the work that you do?
Yeah. I don't know why I started saying anything. No.
Well,
Just offering children choices of what they want to do or what they want to eat, or
yeah.
giving them multiple choices and letting them choose and trusting in their own ability.
Yeah, so choices is a great approach. Yeah. Alright, we'll continue on because I'll be able to keep explaining anyway. So, as to meet diverse needs and preferences of clients within the mental health sector, it can be argued that adopting a person-centered approach is ideal. So basically, using this approach helps organisations support workers to provide flexible, responsible and accessible services to individuals with diverse and complex needs. As to effectively communicate with clients, a person-centered approach can be adopted in respect to its core principles. And there's a particular man who the theory is based on. It comes from his philosophies, and do you know who that man may be, given the image of him here?
Yellow llama, is it? No.
That's good. You're thinking, you give me some answers, so thanks, Mark. So this
Freud.
man is Freud. Well, he's a psychologist, so you get a bit closer.
So you just go zygotes.
Carl Jung, no. Right. Who guesses? It's Carl Rogers. So he's a humanistic psychologist, and he believed for a person to grow, they need an environment that provides them with genuineness, acceptance, and empathy. And there's a little quote down here. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. So, Carl Rogers developed key principles as to provide person-centered outcomes. So I'll discuss a few of these. So, self-actualization, unconditional positive regard, and congruence. These are three core principles within using a person-centered approach. So firstly, we've got self-actualization. Rogers believed that we behave as we do based on how we personally perceive a situation. So this went against a more deterministic outlook at the time. So obviously it's sort of given that power back to the individual for their own self-discovery, as opposed to a more as opposed to a professional maybe taking more control over that and determining what's best for someone. So basically Rogers believed that as humans we have a tendency to self-actualize, meaning that we have the ability to fulfill our own potential as to grow and develop as individuals, given the right environmental conditions. So that would be provided, through using a person-centered approach, which I'll further explain within the principles. So the second principle here is unconditional positive regard. So this is basically the acceptance of individuals for who they are. Positive regard, using this practice, is not drawn in respect to someone making a mistake or doing something considered wrong. So this respects that people are able to self-actualize and learn through individual choices. So basically it's a freedom to try new things and make mistakes. That's considered okay as a learning process. And yeah, that leads us to congruence. So there may be a vast difference between someone's sense of self and how they actually behave, and this will create an incongruence. So Rogers believed that for an individual to achieve self-actualization, they must first be in a state of congruence. So the development of congruence is said to be dependent on an unconditional positive regard. So you can see how it all ties together. But moving on, this is more based on the prac today. So yeah, you'll be required to participate in a group activity, and the following information is going to be directly related. So you can always look back at that past information, but I just kind of like you to keep that in mind in terms of our outlook towards individuals within the practice that I'm going to put forward as well. I think it ties in quite nicely. So active listening. As to communicate effectively, it's seen vital to actively listen and apply person-centered communication skills. Adopting some basic counselling skills will teach you this without actually being a counsellor or counselling. So it's applicable to many professions, services, including nursing, social work, the medical profession, being a support worker, just to name a few. Working in early childhood would also be relevant. So yeah, I'll show you a video and then I'll break it all down.
Think about how much information you get every day from listening. Your boss, your colleagues, your clients, and your suppliers may communicate with you often. So will your family and friends. How much of what all these people say do you pay attention to? How much are you actually remembering from these conversations? Chances are, it's a lot less than you think. A lot of times we act as if we're listening to the other person, but the reality is that our minds are racing to other topics or already planning what we're going to say in return. This means that we can miss important things that the other person is saying. Active listening is when you make the conscious effort to hear and understand people so that you get the complete message. There are several things you can do to become an active listener. First, you need to pay attention. We know this is a bit obvious, but it's the most important part of active listening. For instance, make eye contact with the person talking to you. Ignore outside factors like other conversations so that you can focus solely on what the person is saying. Most importantly, put your own thoughts on hold. Resist the urge to start planning out what you're going to say in return. You also need to show the other person that you're listening to them. You can nod your head, smile, and say yes occasionally. All of these signals let the other person know you're still with them. Providing feedback on what the other person has just said is another important part of active listening. For instance, all of us hear information through our own personal filters and judgments. This can affect our understanding. To make sure you heard and understood the message correctly, paraphrase it or repeat it back to the person. You can also ask questions to get more information, but make sure that you listen to what they're saying before you plan your response. You also need to avoid interrupting when they are speaking. Once they're finished, you can respond appropriately and with an honest answer or opinion. Active listening is a skill that all of us should use more often. The better you are at listening, the more information you'll receive. This can pay off with big rewards in your career and strengthen your bonds with family and friends. You can find out more about active listening in the article that accompanies this video.
Alright. So, active listening. So she basically covered most of what I'll cover, but I'm going to break it down for you guys. So hopefully it was on your understanding, and then you can practically practice these skills. So here are the ones that we're going to practice today, and I'll break them down. I'll go through them all. Body language, encourages, reflecting, paraphrasing, and summarising. So we'll start with body language. So eye contact will show you're actively engaging with the speaker, and it will demonstrate focus, attentiveness, and make the person feel heard. Smiling will encourage the speaker to continue as it's welcoming and provides a sense of approval. And proxemics, it's a good rule of thumb to be at least 3 feet away. Should be close enough for a regular tone of voice to be heard. And in respect to body language, cultural differences need to be respected, which was covered last session to an extent in regards to some differences around eye contact, and there may be others. Alright, so now we're on to encourages. So to break down encourages a bit, they're basically brief non-verbal or verbal techniques to encourage the speaker to continue. So non-verbally, we've got the nodding of the head. You know, don't know how to do that. But yeah, you know, it seems quite straightforward, but a handy tool. Also positive facial expressions, so I guess it ties into body language there too, with smiling, which is a good one. And also verbal statements such as, you know, aha, hear what you're saying, tell me more, can encourage that conversation to keep flowing. Yeah. Next we've got reflecting, so it's basically mirroring. It's quite brief in terms of what you feed back, and it's repeating what's been said by the speaker back to them. So it's a useful technique, you know, to touch on what the speaker said, and it may encourage the speaker to continue on the discussion, knowing that you're actively involved in what he or she has said. Yeah. And we also have paraphrasing and summarising, which is kind of similar, except it's in your own words. So paraphrasing is a good way to enable the speaker to correct you if you've misinterpreted what they've said, what they've expressed. And yeah, it's said to build empathy by making the person feel heard. So that's great for the rapport building. And summarising is basically paraphrasing, within larger excerpts of overall conversation. And it's a great way to conclude a conversation in a respectful manner because you've acknowledged everything that's been said, and you can kind of tie things up, perhaps, in a respectful way. So here are the active listening skills that we've covered. So we've got body language, eye contact, smiling, proxemics, 3 feet of distance. Encourages, verbal and non-verbal, so the nodding of the head for non-verbal, and also that positive body language, facial expressions, and verbal, encouraging the conversation to continue, such as saying like aha or tell me more. Reflecting, so repeating back statements made within brief conversation, show that you're listening and engaging with exactly what the speaker is saying. So you've got the paraphrasing, that's feeding back excerpts of information in your own words, and summarising, so feeding back large excerpts of information to clarify and conclude overall conversation. So after the break that we're just about to have, a short 10-minute break, we'll get back to these skills and actually practice them. Thanks, guys. Welcome back, guys. So now we're going to look at getting into groups and doing an activity, given the basic counselling skills that I put forward in regards to active listening. So there'll be groups of 3. So we've got 7, but that's okay, we can work this out. And basically within the groups of 3, there's going to be a speaker, an active listener and an observer. So the speaker will lead the conversation, and I was thinking maybe the speaker could lead by talking about their favourite pastime as a topic. You guys can come up with something else, but maybe that's a start. The active listener will adopt the skills that I've discussed, and I'll also put them up here as a guide so you can refer to them, because it might not be so easy to just use them straight away. It takes practice. And there'll be an observer, and I've got these tick sheets here, so I can bust them out now. So basically the observer will watch the speaker and the active listener in conversation, and mark off when the basic active listening skills have been used. And within the groups, I'd like everyone to try each role and rotate. And that's why on the sheet here I've got 3 lots to mark on. So obviously, observer 1, the first observer, and the second one, and so forth. There's space for everyone to have a go. So here are the skills again. So you can always refer back to the screen if you get a little stuck. Obviously you want the conversation to flow, but it's a practice and you'll get better at it. So we've got 4 and 3. I think if we take turns, that will be okay. If not everyone gets a turn, it will still be good to be involved and listen. And it's a learning process together. So just being another observer is fine, but it'd be good if everyone can make sure they have a go at least one of the roles, if not all of them. Okay, so I guess we'll just split the room in half, unless you guys want to make your own groups. And you might want to rearrange the furniture so the speaker and the listener are facing one another appropriately. The observer's sort of maybe sitting back a little bit.
There you go. You can observe, I guess.
Yeah.
Favorite pastime. Do you like that? go first.
So we'll just establish who's doing
I
what.
was hoping to
So-
just be the
so
observer,
Oh,
the
that's okay.
extra
Oh,
one,
That's
but
fine.
I was gonna observe.
So
We've got the observer
We have too
here.
many observers. I'll talk.
I don't mind
Evan,
being one of the roles.
Do you want to be the
but-
speaker or the active listener first?
I'll
you want to speak?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Then you'll be playing the role of
I'll
the
try.
listener. Did you want to maybe sit somewhere so you can see the
yeah,
screen
we'll
as
do
well as a bit of a prompt?
I'll go
I can
first.
switch.
Do you want to switch
Yeah.
situations?
I'm not
or-
gonna lie, I don't have great hearing, so there's lots
Well,
going
it's my
on
favourite
that I'm
pastime,
probably not going to be a very great active
Drinking
listener.
So in terms of like being somewhat close to each other, maybe it might
Yeah, yeah.
work to be a bit closer within the noisy room. That will work.
I actually find, because I'm a little hard of hearing,
what
I
kind of
actually find that
video
makes me a better active listener, because then I just nod a
Yes, yeah,
lot, and I have to give them all the nonverbal
Sometimes
cues,
I
'cause
feel like I'm
can't-
just
probably
staring
should.
though, like,
Yeah.
like concentrating a little too hard. I'm just like, nah, I'm getting creepy.
Alright, well, being creepy is fine, just don't creep me out.
Wow.
I've been through a lot.
Yeah, okay.
Pastime.
Whereabouts do you do it?
I really like climbing.
Mostly around South
As much as I can.
South
I
London.
was on a good climbing schedule of like 2
Okay,
to
so
3 times
are
a
you
week.
actually,
when I was back in the
you're
States,
travelling
but
around, it's not
now,
on your own farm?
with my job and
You're-
everything,
No,
and lack of
yeah,
friends to
we're
go
around
climbing
different
with.
farms.
Uh,
Farmers.
I climb less, but I'm still trying to struggle to find my routine. So, also the climbing gym
Roll
here
in there in
is
the
kind of shit,
sheer.
small and cold,
Yeah.
so it makes me not want to go there.
Yeah. Have you even entered into any of the sharing competitions?
I'm trying to
Yeah, I
plan
have.
climbing trips with
I've
this
done a
guy
few
and other
of those,
people in the
yeah.
future to go. Places
I
like
wasn't very
Nelson
good.
or
Nah,
Laos.
probably being in
And
there, being up on the
it's
stage.
his own
Yeah.
place. In between
Southeast
Cambodia
Asia,
and
okay.
Ah,
And so being up on
Yeah, I
the
wouldn't
stage,
say I like
yeah.
public
So
speaking.
climbing.
anything
Do you
like that.
climb?
so being up on the stage,
I don't like heights.
Yeah.
What do you climb though?
Oh,
what are
rocks.
they judging you on?
Like I don't
Yeah.
climb buildings or something.
Ah,
Yeah,
speed.
I should have said that. Right. I
Speed
guess I take it
goes
for
up.
granted that everybody
Quality
knows what I'm talking
should
about.
Well, like,
Okay.
you look at YouTube and there's like climbing,
Mhm.
Yeah,
like
well,
up the
should-
building
should-
side and you're just like,
how
Yes,
fast
yeah,
and
you
then
no.
there's climbing rocks because my partner does like
Yeah, well, the
outdoor
sheep comes
activities,
off the-
which
the
clearly
fleece
I
comes
don't
off the
do.
sheep.
Okay.
It's got
Because I don't
a
like
to
heights. He pushed me
it
off
sort of adds to the
the edge of the
level.
cave once.
With a
So
rope?
speed.
So it's fun.
Oh yeah, it was like we were just like in deep water or something.
Yeah, okay.
It's like,
I was too scared to like climb off the side, so he kind of just.
There's not that much.
Can I just stop everyone for a sec?
Sorry.
So I guess the aim, like I'm just sort of listening, and it's all going well. I guess the aim is for the speaker to really speak,
yeah.
and as far as the listener goes, they either reflect back what the person said, and then the person sort of can sort of speak on from then, or they paraphrase what was said within maybe a bit more information, and it does really come back to the speaker. It's very person-centered.
Okay.
So you don't really need to ask different questions so much.
So we're not actually having a conversation. I'm actually just meant to listen. And
Kind of, yeah. I know it's maybe a hard
It
concept.
seems like
to get
it's
used
not
to.
like a normal conversation.
Yeah.
It's almost like someone giving us speech.
It's not really a two-way conversation so much.
Mm.
So I guess that makes it a bit hard for the speaker, who might be a bit reluctant to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, because as
But it can be
a
done.
speaker, you're sort of feeding off the other person in conversation.
Yeah.
To talk.
So the
Unless
other
I'm giving a
person
talk,
is
like
to
you
sort
are.
of engage the speaker about what they're talking about,
Yeah.
and that's sort of all. So you can reflect it back, and paraphrase what was said, and that can clarify whether you understand what's being said.
Mm.
So I don't know. I'd like you guys to try and
Yeah,
do it that
try
way
it.
and see how you go. Yeah.
Hmm.
But it's all good. You guys are doing well. Yeah.
Would you be able to paraphrase
I
or
realised
reflect
those
anything I
every
said?
time I
So I have to say all over again.
pretty much, you like to climb. You wish your friend would come climbing too. You'd like
Okay, so
to climb more in
should we
Dunedin,
carry on,
but
or
we're
would
too
you-
cold.
Yeah.
this one
And
is when you turn the
the
speaker.
Dunedin place is shit.
Yeah.
So that was a summary that really concluded what Adam had to say. able to
I
say
feel empowered and validated.
Yeah, I know. So it was
Yeah.
like they were.
So
I
perhaps
try
you
really hard to
guys
listen.
to summarize
could
and
switch
paraphrase.
roles now.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was good. That was good summarising for you.
I did it right.
You get a bit of a big tip.
You observed what I was doing.
She observed
I'm ready to actively listen. I'm so ready to actively listen.
Yeah.
I guess that's me.
Makes you a talker.
Okay. Wow.
Right, so he's speaking of his.
I don't have much in life, but I like to bake.
Yeah.
Yep, I made Weet-Bix slice
okay.
today,
Weet-Bix
So
slice.
my
Yes.
favourite pastime.
which I forgot to add part of the cocoa in, but I'm sure it'll still taste nice.
Been to
So
art
please try
school,
and
so
get some.
got really into
Um,
painting.
what?
You have it here?
Yeah, it's in the fridge. It's for snack time.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I use acrylic paints.
So he didn't tell you about snacks?
And I like to.
Hey.
I made our Weet-Bix slice, but I forgot to add part of the
yeah,
cocoa in it, and that they should have some at
Oh
snack
yeah,
time.
that's
Everybody
a
should
surprise for a
have
lady, yeah.
some.
Yeah.
I surprised him, alright?
Yeah. It's a reward, but
Yeah, so I've been trying to carry it out for
Rewind.
continuous.
no, it's fine.
Cut that part out.
Well, so one skill
Yeah,
that you can
I-
practice is when
I
the
guess
speaker
I
basically says,
in
I
in
like,
general, so
no,
I've been doing a
you
little
can
bit
say I like
of
climbing, and
ceramics
then you
as
can be
well.
like, well, the other day
photography.
I went climbing and had lots of fun.
Um,
Reflecting could be, you had lots of fun, and then the speaker was like, yeah, I had lots of fun because
Yeah.
so and so, you know.
Ah.
So that's sort of the encouragement
Yeah,
that comes out
am
without sort
really
of putting
childhood-
your own sort of
really
personal stuff
really
into it.
childhood,
So
I
it's
had to
very
be a teacher.
person-centered.
I feel like I actually do
Yeah,
take
I've
these
only
skills
just
a lot
It
more
might seem a
serious.
bit patronising even, but it's seen as a useful tool. It's been practiced a lot. So you could try reflecting.
Yeah, well,
So it's
I'd
been
like
practiced
to
a
Perhaps
lot.
it's
I
something
was
that
just
Yeah, so it's my
Yeah,
favourite.
just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I haven't quite picked up yet. Yeah.
I like to think
All right.
it as a
I don't really
I mean, yeah, it's hard to sort of
exciting
tie it all
life to
in.
tell
But
you guys
trying to put
about
my
for you
emotions
to
into the
like
picture
be
as
interested.
well.
You don't feel like you've got an exciting life?
I study, so
I've got
I'm
an
literally
appointment.
in the classroom, baking, sleeping, repeat.
All good? So you're in classroom baking.
I'm not in the classroom baking.
Good encouragement.
That's great because you paraphrase.
That's right. Good application.
And then you put it forward to Pauline
I know.
to correct you so you understand more of what she's getting at. So
I had taken baking
yeah,
in
you
2
could
classes.
tick off paraphrase.
Yeah.
How we doing?
No, you did. You got 4 out of like.
Come
Yeah,
on.
you guys have done really well. You're doing really
Yeah,
well.
yeah, because you went 3 feet
I
apart.
was totally 3 feet apart.
I thought you had the verbal and
3 feet?
non-verbal.
I know what 3 feet is. Do you know
I
what
had
3
little
feet is?
feet.
Oh, I guess about
3 feet is
3
like.
feet. It's 3 feet.
Well, I had a
You're
foot
like-
long subway
You're like
and
5 foot something.
That's like,
A foot's like.
What are you
Yeah.
Why are you talking about height?
So all day, every day, I
Just
have
'cause that's
random
the
people
usual.
come in and
at
sit down
least
and tell me
though,
a
so it's
problem.
not
You're
like
asking
we
an
were like
American if I know
really
what feet
close.
How many centimeters was that,
About 30. That's about 33.
man? Could be, yeah. Anyways,
You're just gonna-
what I
You guys
did,
got it.
what I did was I used my great active listening skills when she told me that she was a little hard of hearing, and so I compensated.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was good. But
I'm
it-
giving myself the 3 feet.
It was at
You're
least.
a terrible
So, I mean,
observer, and that's my observation.
To be fair, he said you're about 5, and it says at least 3. So you want to be
least.
further
Okay,
and closer.
so you can be too close.
Yeah,
That'd be
like you know,
awful.
in the personal bubble
My bad.
kind of.
My bad.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
actively listening, but obviously not actively reading.
You weren't actively listening
Maybe
to
he was
me.
actively listening, but you didn't
Yeah, it's very
understand quite what
person-centered, so
it
it's
meant.
very.
There we go.
much
There we go.
paraphrase
The instructions
Well-
in order to get feedback and clarity.
Trying to
And I'm
say
gonna
without,
actively listen to
your own
all of
input
Ed's
and,
wonderful stories.
It's not it's
The thing
not
I don't
personal
like
for the
about
listener.
Aiden.
Let's hear it.
Okay, no.
What don't you like, Ed?
You're perfect.
I hear what you're saying.
Got it rolling.
You know something about me. What what do you want me to talk about?
But obviously,
It's
there's
you
practice
said
use
what
as
are
well.
pastimes? You have all sorts of interesting things they used to do.
Bit outside of the
Like
context.
acting. And
Yeah, I can
art
see how like
and-
it's leading.
How about a couple pastimes?
Yeah.
How about
What
what?
do you do with your spare time?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
These
Cut
days.
it out.
Besides
Yeah.
cleaning shitty
Give me a
rooms.
quick example.
What do we do here?
I still haven't done
Like
that yet.
if you're listening to someone
Sheep.
Those poor sheep.
Just to
and you want to carry it all,
not just.
Is it like rewording?
rewording what they've seen.
That hasn't happened
Yeah,
yet.
in your
Trying
own
to put
words.
it in your own words. So
Reflecting is exactly what
To
the
be fair, I
person
didn't
said.
actually hear any of that
Okay,
other than
good.
sheep.
Okay,
And
good.
then it turned
So
into
just
bums, and I'm
say
like,
X
all
that
you
you
do
really
is
No,
know.
like.
that's perfect. That's perfect.
I know what's something that you really like, Sinead.
So what? Something I do in my spare time.
Pardon?
Fishing.
I'd
Yeah, it
love
could
to
be
know.
like, oh, you really like knitting. And then you could be like, yeah.
Bit of reading.
You know, I love
Yeah,
reading.
I like to
Good.
read. I
Elaborate
like to
on
read
that
before
Yeah.
bedtime.
sort of thing.
Thoughts.
And
And
then
at the
you
moment I'm
paraphrase.
reading, did I
Huh?
mention this?
So
Oh, it doesn't matter, I can mention it again.
Paraphrasing
I'm
is
reading
more
a
in your own
book by
words.
Malcolm Gladwell.
So you might
Yes.
hear,
Love
So,
him.
you know,
David Goliath.
an amount of
Oh, you haven't
content.
read this one yet?
I
No, no,
haven't.
it's
No.
not
And
yours.
then
And
paraphrase that.
it is about underdogs.
within
pretty
your
much,
own words.
winning out over
And
things.
that could like
And it
provide
starts
you more
off quite
clarity if you
positive.
get it wrong.
Yeah, I think it's
Uh,
almost easier
and
to
then
paraphrase.
And
it's
it's
darker
about,
and
like,
darker
bigger,
kind of as it goes through it. So the
bigger
initial
context of the
story of the
conversation as
underdog was
opposed to a statement made, which would be
Silicon
reflective.
Valley
So it's kind of
father
like
who
what
took
you
over
understood
a
from what
netball
they've said,
team,
even if it's slightly different
his
than they-
12-year-old daughter's
And
netball
it's another
team,
way of showing that you're
and he
listening.
had
Yeah.
never played
Yeah.
basketball
Because
before.
obviously, you know, someone
And
might
so he put his
have quite a
own,
lot to say.
he learned the
and,
rules and he put his own
the best you can
spin on
probably
the
do is
game and what they should do
paraphrase.
because they weren't very
If
good
you
at
miss
the
something, then
game
hopefully
to win. And so they have this very
Speak
different
will give you
strategy
more
and it
understanding.
gets them all the way through to the
I feel like
finals.
paraphrasing
But
is
it's quite an
good if you're
aggressive
trying to understand
strategy.
someone's
It's not
emotion,
against the
because
rules,
you
but
might
it's
not
not how the rest of the teams play.
necessarily understand it.
And
but
so he wins,
guess
but
it or interpret it.
a lot of them
paraphrase
felt
it back to
hard
them
done by.
And let them
So that started off kind of light-hearted,
tell
and
you
now it's
otherwise
moved
if
through
it's,
like
you know,
Yeah,
you've got it
that's
wrong.
right.
leukemia. The other guy
Yeah, that's a
came
big
up
part
with
of it.
chemotherapy, and that's pretty brutal.
Definitely.
And on
So you might have
people whose
got
parents died,
exactly what the
when they were
person
really
did,
young,
you know,
and how a
in terms of what it means.
disproportionate amount of them
Yeah.
succeed. And now currently
And,
it's about
Yeah, you might
father
use a
who
particular word to sort
whose
of
daughter was
describe what they're
killed
saying,
in
but
a
they're like, oh no,
horrific
not exactly like
robbery
that. You know, it's
situation,
based on a
and
particular
how
word
that
you've used. And,
inspired him to bring
Yeah.
about change. So it's not
Wow.
such light-hearted reading.
yeah, it just helps with the
before
understanding
bedtime.
of what the person's saying and
But,
taking it in more. And,
yeah, that's what.
So,
That's
Yeah,
what
so
I
what
think
I'm
we do.
hearing is that you like to
Cares
read
about
before
what
you
the
go to
person's saying, not
bed.
so much what
Yeah.
you've got to say yourself.
Stories
Yeah.
of struggle and
It's sort of
triumph.
pointed towards the theory.
No, not necessarily. Just currently, that's what I'm reading.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I like to
Has
alternate
everyone had
between
a
fiction and
you know,
non-fiction.
Oh, fiction and non-fiction.
Yeah. So currently, this is
Oh,
non-fiction.
yeah, I already got it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Whoa, non-fiction. Yeah,
Yeah.
flew my mind.
Seems like
Well, you think I know everything there is to know about
it's
it?
pretty
No.
No,
Yeah.
don't bother even coming on the
You
podcast.
want to watch the
No, not at all.
I've
You
had
can give yourself and just paraphrase
skills
to
on
yourself.
this.
I don't
What
even
I'm
need to read
saying.
the book.
No.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
did such a great job. It was like I read the back cover. I was like, wow.
So yeah, you needed a bit of clearing up.
But seriously, I do like
Everything
Malcolm Gladwell, so I
every
would
day,
like to
but
borrow
that's
the book. I
incorporate
feel like
it,
you
so I
mentioned this
noticed it.
before.
It's taken me a long time to read it because it's gone so dark. I don't always feel like reading
That's
it
what
much.
judge of this sort of stuff.
That was
Yeah.
a text I'm going to stop now.
Did you say that this book
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
it's nonfiction,
It's understanding.
but it's like a
That would
narrative,
be-
or is this
that
like
should be
based
the
off a
book for you
true
now,
story?
No, it's
Because-
fiction.
Paraphrasing
It's fiction.
Yeah.
Wait,
You said it was
Malcolm,
non-fiction?
I didn't. Yeah, I
No,
thought
non-fiction.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Cool.
It's non-fiction.
Pretty much just like lead on.
It's non-fiction.
It's non-fiction.
You're confusing it. It's
Right.
non-fiction.
Yeah.
It's real.
Right, it's real. So
stuff.
it's based off of a real
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So good. It's
Of course, of course.
different
Malcolm Gladwell.
practice.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, the more you
Oh,
know, the better.
Did you know that he was Jamaican? His mum's Jamaican?
No.
Basically,
Anyway, sorry, we're done.
Basically.
Yeah, you got
Because he's
all
like
the
a white
steps.
British. Did I?
Yeah,
And he looks
so we're
absolutely-
asking
Yeah, it's
like
very
But
good.
you
didn't see me
It's very
smile.
good.
I kind
of assumed that as well.
Yeah.
What do you
Oh,
know?
sorry, I thought I did that.
Yep.
At
But-
least
How you
one
can
of our
interact
kids
with
was
people.
Awesome.
There you go.
Well, I should because I do this for a
I've read
living.
all
So
of
if I'm not very good at it, listening.
When I finish this
Yeah,
book, I'm going to read
definitely.
your book.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us something about your job.
That'll be very
Well, I work
hard
with some.
comparatively.
Yeah.
I have to work.
Do you have to do this stuff too, or is this
Yeah.
just because you're
Well,
studying?
this is because he's
Yes.
studying, but
Yeah.
we do all of
Ready
this
for
at work.
getting your heart
That's
rate
good.
down.
Most of my
I got all the
reading is
tips,
like-
so.
It's kind of hard because I was like really like listening about the
That's the
conversation.
active listener.
That's what
what I said. I'm doing some work, so I better do a good
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Because we have to active listen.
It's a bit subconscious, hey?
Did you go to Ben's
I
farewell
recently
party?
Yeah.
I was sorry that I missed it, but I had to go pick her up
My
at
fault.
church.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, but
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
On a busy road.
All right. Well, sorry to cut anyone short, but we'll have to wrap it up now. So I hope you all got something out of that. And yeah, I'd like to hear.
Real nice and come on, I think so.
Yeah, a few opinions around how it went.
Ah, missed you.
Has anyone got anything to say?
His conversation was really interesting, so it was quite hard to actually observe and try and read there and then look at him and tick and listen.
It's quite a conscious effort, as Sinead pointed out, to actually use all the skills at once. So it's quite a practice. So yeah, be a good active listener given these basic active listening skills. But, I feel that they're quite beneficial, and they can become very subconscious and within how you interact with people. So yeah, any other points, observations, feedback?
It seems the difficulty might also be dependent upon how willing the speaker is to really elaborate on what they're
Yeah,
speaking about. Like
sure.
it can be kind of like pulling it out of them versus just very naturally going along with the conversation by listening.
Yeah, you get people that are reluctant to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. So it is very dependent on the person wanting to talk as well. But I mean, you will come across lots of people that do just want to talk and be heard, so I think that's where it's really useful. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with silence either in conversation. So yeah, it's something to consider. Yeah. So today we've discussed the person-centered approach in respect to Carl Rogers, and also basic active listening skills. And then we practice these basic active listening skills in triad groups. I've got some feedback forms for everyone to complete for me. Thanks heaps for coming. The more you practice, the better you'll get. So you'll get another chance to practice. And you'll also be tested on the information given today, and the slides will be available online. So thanks everyone, and see you next time.